Today I'm going to show you how to create an image like one of these. Okay, so these are called action sequences, and basically what's happening is there's several individual photos composited into one, making one solid image. So this photo right here is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 separate photos used to make this one. Here's another example. Okay, notice a couple of things. One, the background behind it never seems to change. Okay, that's really important. So when you're taking your photos, you can't actually move the camera to follow the action. You, the photographer, has to stay absolutely still. And you have to make sure that you have enough space while you're taking your picture that the person that's doing the action has the space to complete it. Okay. So just remember, when you're taking these pictures, don't move the camera, zoom out as much as you can, and that way the background will stay steady. It'll make it a whole lot easier. The other thing I wanted to say is notice how in all of these actions, they're not happening on top of itself, okay? So the person that is doing the action is actually moving enough distance to separate, okay? So here's another example. There's a little bit of overlap happening right here. And that's absolutely fine. It's just a little bit more difficult to deal with in Photoshop. So I wanted to show you one other photo. So this one right here, this photo's great, but it takes a lot more work to basically make it look correct. Okay, so let's get started in me showing you how to do this. So at this point, we're just going to say you've taken your photos, and you just need to know how to put it together. So you need to have a minimum of 4. Okay, 4 photos in your sequence. And I would say you're going to take probably 10 to 15, and then you're going to go through them and make sure that you're using the ones that you want. So there's not too much just standing around in the beginning or at the end. Okay, so you'll start with your base photo, and also your cameras number all these pictures so you can tell which ones go in order. So number 5 is obviously the first one, so that's going to be where my starting point. And then my next photo is number 7, and I'm going to use my move tool here. Okay, so that's my move tool, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to drag it to that first image, and I'm just going to bring it right into place. Okay, here's what we're going to do next. Now I have this in here. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so I can see the edges. Okay, I have this in here, but I can't tell if it's lined up correctly or not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my layers palette, and I'm going to find where it says opacity, and I'm going to drop that down just a little bit just so I can see both photos. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that picture and I'm going to move it so that the backgrounds line up as best as I can get them, okay? So I'm using my arrow keys right now to kind of help out. The area that I'm really checking for is the area that I'm going to be editing through, so all in here is where I really want it to kind of line up. Okay, once I have it how I like it, I'm just going to come back over here, and I'm going to leave the opacity down like that. That's actually fine. Then I'm going to add what's called a layer mask. So I'm going to come down to the bottom here, and this is a layer mask. So just go ahead and click it, and what you're going to end up with is this white mask right here with a link symbol. Make sure that link symbol stays. Okay, so what I'm looking at now is I have my photo, all right, my little image thumbnail, and then I have a mask right here. And see that white frame that goes around it? That white frame is saying that it's active, okay? Now, it's active until I click away from it. So if I click away from it, see how now the white frame is on the photo? So you want to make sure that you're working on the mask for this. Okay, now I'm going to grab my brush tool. I'm going to come up to the top and make sure my brush tool is working the way I want it to. So for this, I'm going to make my hardness probably right there in the middle. The mode should always be set to normal. The opacity is 100, and the flow for this is going to be 100 as well. Okay, the next thing is, I'll deal with the size in just a moment. The next thing here is I want to make sure that I'm working with black. The shortcut to toggle between the two of these is the X key on your keyboard. So if I just press X, it'll go back and forth. I could also hit this double arrow right here, and it would do the same thing. If for whatever reason you don't have black and white here, to get them back, all you do is press D on your keyboard, and that would bring up default colors. Okay, so I have black. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be painting in all of the previous actions. So I'm going to leave, this is the current action that's happening right now. okay, part of the sequence that I'm on, but I'm going to be painting this one back here, okay? So all I'm going to do is just kind of come in. Now, if the backgrounds line up perfectly, then I don't have to be super careful about this. But if they don't, then I have to be a lot more careful. Okay, don't forget the shadows. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back in. I'm going to go ahead and bump up this opacity and see, so she stays in here. And don't worry about this line right here. We'll worry about that in a minute. Okay. Now let's just say by accident, I happen to brush over the current part of the sequence. If I do that, all I have to do to flip that is go back to white, and I can come in and I can just draw her back in. Okay. So if you ever mess up, it's a very easy fix. Okay, so we're basically going to just continue repeating this. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the next number of the sequence. That's number 9. I'm going to grab my move tool, and I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag it to the first one again and drop it back into place. This is where we just start repeating what we've already done. Bring the opacity down. Okay, a little higher so I can make sure I can see both. And then again, I'm going to line it up as best as I can. Okay, I am going to add a mask. I'm going to grab my brush tool. It's already set up because it was before. I'm still on black. Now this time I'm going to again leave the current part of the sequence alone, but I have to paint in both of the previous parts of the sequence. So again, yes, I'm coloring the same one in again. And again, the shadow. Okay, and then now I get to color this one in too. And if for whatever reason you don't grab all of it and you don't notice till later, you can always come back to these individual layer masks and finish painting them in. Okay, and again, there's her shadow down here. There, and I'll just bring that opacity up. And now I have 3 parts of the sequence. And then lastly, I'll go in and I'll grab my final one, bring it to my first, drop it into place, drop the opacity slider down, line it up as best you can, and you can see that my background has moved quite a bit in this, and that is not a good thing. So please make sure that when you do yours, you don't move the background very much. At this point, I'm going to add a mask. I'm going to grab my brush tool, and again, I'm coming in and I'm painting everything before this current sequence. Okay, so that's the only one that I don't have to paint in. And if you ever notice that it looks like you're just painting black, it's because you're not on the mask over here. So just be careful of that. Make sure that you're always painting on the mask. There shouldn't be any reason to be painting on the photo itself. Okay, so you are going to be creating 2 of these, one of which is going to be an action sequence, and then another one that's going to be your creative take on this same technique. Okay, so what could you do with multiple images of the same person and not necessarily make them do an action? Or maybe you do. It's your choice, however you want to do it. And again, don't forget to bring that opacity back up, and that's your finished sequence.